My name is Deanna Rhodes, and I'm the Executive Director of Connect Summit County, and we are so excited to have everyone join us here on the Zoom meeting, but we are also streaming this live on Facebook, and we'll be recording it, so hopefully if you couldn't catch it live right now and ask your questions, you can still catch the recording. So really grateful for everyone that is able to join us today. As I mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Connect Summit County, and we are a nonprofit and we focus on mental health, and our mission is to create a well-informed, stigma-free community with access to mental health resources for everyone. And this particular conversation and this particular speaker, I'm so excited to be able to kind of present and announce that we're doing this is because, October 1st, a lot of you that maybe are tuning in, especially on Facebook Live, realize on October 1st is when South Summit High School was able to secure a gay-straight alliance. And we're coming up on that anniversary, and that is such a huge thing for our community. We all probably in this conversation realize and understand that a gay-straight alliance is not just creating a safe space and making a place open and welcoming for our LGBTQ youth, but it actually makes communities safer for all students. And that is something huge to celebrate. So if you're with the Gay Straight Alliance of South Summit or any of our schools in this area, thank you for tuning in. We are so grateful to have you and all the hard work. I also am really thrilled to partner with both Summit County Library and the Park City Library to be able to bring forward this event. And one of those interesting divine things is I was strolling through the the Summit County Library months and months ago and was able to pick up Shaun's book. And I was like, this is amazing, what is this? And so I think it was probably 2 in the morning, and I emailed him through his website, and he was like, of course, I would love to speak. And then when I talked to the libraries, it was a no-brainer for them as well. And what I love about that is something that I know, but maybe everyone else doesn't think of as much as we do, is that the libraries are magical at creating safe spaces. And I think books are also, and stories are incredible ways to connect with each other. And so I'm just real thrilled that together we could all do this and make this happen. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Rachel with the Summit County Library and Teen Services, and would love to hear a little bit from you. And then we'll turn it to Katrina, and then we will kick off. So thank you.
Thanks, Deanna. As you said, I'm the Teen Services Librarian for Summit County Library. And we were so excited that Connect asked us to be part of this event because it's right in line with one of our core values, which is to support our community. So we are your library, and to reflect that, we are diverse, inclusive, and accessible to everyone. And a lot of the support the library provides is by connecting our community members to resources and information to help everyone thrive. And Shaun's books exude the authentic connection that we all crave. Especially at a time like this. And I think events like this address specific needs in our community. Talking about these issues are more important than ever. At the moment, our buildings are closed, but I'm here to tell you the library is more than a building, and tonight's event is just one example of that. Thank you.
Yes, to that. I'm Katrina Kamek. I am the Youth Services Librarian at the Park City Library. And when, just like Deanna said, when she brought it up, I was like, yes, this is exactly what we're all about. Libraries are such a beautiful, wonderful, not only physical space, but just also, it provides community, especially in times when community can feel like kind of hard to find. So being available and having these opportunities for representation of all types of diverse voices is huge, always, but specifically right now as well. So we like to empower minds, and inspire imagination and connect community, and that's exactly what this event is doing. So we are happy to be a part of it, thrilled to be here, so excited for the to hear Shaun speak, and just thrilled to be a part of this amazing event. I'm so excited. Okay. I'm going to stop blabbering now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So I'll read Shaun's bio, and then we'll have just a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get rocking and rolling. And, I'm also pretty thrilled. I think sometimes the best parts of presentations can be the Q&A at the end. So be thinking about that. We will be opening it up, whether you want to drop it in the chat or privately message. We can, manage all sorts of different types of questions. So, but let me read Shaun's bio. And again, I'm not very good at memorization. So here we go. Born in West Palm Beach, Florida, Shaun grew up 20 minutes north in the town of Jupiter. He has 3 brothers, 2 older, 1 younger, and a half-sister. Shaun attended Jupiter High School before going on to Florida Atlantic University, where he studied medieval and Renaissance literature. Shaun has also studied emergency medicine, gaining his EMT certification and firefighting. Ultimately, he ended up working with computers, designing databases, building apps, and coding websites before publishing his first book, The Death Day Letter. Shaun currently lives in Seattle, Washington, and works full-time as an author. In his free time, he enjoys baking, running, designing 3D environments for virtual reality, and reading.
Shaun, before I do my housekeeping, would you like to say a few words of welcome to our folks at home?
Absolutely. I want to thank you all first for having me here and for putting all of this together. And I wanted to say hi and welcome to everybody who's out there, especially now with COVID going on. I think talking about mental health is more important than ever. So thank you all for taking the time out of your evening to come out here or to sit in front of your computers and listen.
Right? It's kind of crazy. I think that it actually takes a lot right now to sit down again in front of our computers.
It really does.
But I just want to invite all of you to engage in this conversation. So I'm Betty. I'm the event logistics coordinator for Connect Summit County. And if you just move your mouse a little bit, you are going to see a toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And this toolbar is a great way to stay engaged in the conversation that we're having. So please feel free to hit that chat button and add your comments, add a thought, put a question in there. If that arises for you during the event, I'll be checking that often. So if someone asks something in there and it doesn't somehow get brought up during the chat or during the Q&A, I'll make sure to ask that question. When we get to the Q&A, we are going to allow people to unmute and ask their questions. And conversely, if that feels super uncomfortable to you, or if you have something that feels really sensitive that you don't want to share with the group, please feel free to use the chat function and message Betty Morin at Connect Summit County, and I will ensure that that question gets answered for you. So without further ado, Shaun, take it away.
Hello, everybody. And like we said before, thank you for coming out. The first thing I want to say is I want to apologize if I'm a little froggy. Seattle is currently covered in smoke and there's no way to get away from it. So I've been breathing that in for the last week. Before I begin, I also want to say that I am going to be talking about topics surrounding mental health, depression, suicide, and if those make you uncomfortable, if you're sensitive to those topics, please feel free, to drop out of the Zoom meeting. You're not going to hurt my feelings if I touch on something that is a little sensitive for you. I think it's really important that people be able to tackle issues at a time and place that are comfortable to them. And I talked to Betty, and we're going to try and make the text of the speech available afterward so that you can read it later. So without further ado, I am Shaun Hutchinson, and here we go. When I was 19 years old, I attempted to end my life by swallowing 60 extra strength Tylenol. As a result, I spent a couple of weeks in an ICU waiting to see if I would need a liver transplant because, as I discovered, Tylenol overdose destroys the liver slowly and painfully. I was lucky that with the help of medication, my liver began to heal on its own. When I was stable, I was transferred out of the ICU and into a regular bed. A couple of weeks after that, when my doctors were sure that I would make a full recovery, I checked myself into a psychiatric hospital. I wrote about those experiences that led to my attempt to end my life in my 2019 memoir, Brave Face. The memoir chronicles my adolescent years and ends shortly after I was released from the psychiatric hospital. When talking to readers about Brave Face, I'm often asked, and nearly always by adults, what happened to me in the psychiatric hospital that led to my recovery? What epiphany did I have that made me better? The truth is that nothing happened. There was no epiphany, no grand healing, no moment where everything clicked into place, and I suddenly realized that the world was grand and that I wanted to live. My stay in the psychiatric hospital helped to stabilize me. It didn't convince me that I wanted to live, but it helped me realize that I didn't want to die either. When I left the hospital that was treating me for the liver damage caused by my Tylenol overdose, I had a detailed understanding of the problem. I knew how the Tylenol was broken down by my liver and about the enzyme counts that told the story of my liver toxicity. I knew that it could still take years for my liver to fully heal, and that indulging in substances like alcohol or taking Tylenol that were metabolized through the liver put me at risk of liver failure again later in life. When I left the psychiatric hospital, I knew no more about my condition or myself than I had when I'd gone in. We talked about the specific events that had led to my suicide attempt, but I wasn't given a diagnosis. I wasn't put on medication, though that was probably because of my liver. I wasn't told what behaviors put me at risk for a relapse or what I needed to do or what I needed to avoid in the future. Early on in the years that followed, when people asked what happened to me, I said that I had just been a little sad. I told them that I'd gotten confused. I said that I'd been struggling with my sexuality, that I just had a really, really bad day, that my brain had gotten messed up. All of those things were true. I had been sad. I had been confused. I had been struggling with my sexuality. And that day in particular had been really, really bad. But those descriptions of what happened weren't the truth. They were simply ways of avoiding saying the one word I was scared to say. My parents were incredibly honest with me and my brothers growing up when it came to alcohol use. They shared some of their experiences with us. They let us know what they expected they let us know that they expected we would probably try drinking at some point, but that they hoped we would be smart about it. And they promised us that we could always talk to them about it. To ensure that we never drove drunk, they made sure we knew we could call them anytime if we'd been drinking and needed a ride. There would be no repercussions, no punishments, no lectures, no questions asked. I never took my parents up on that offer, but I believed wholeheartedly that it was sincere. Because of their honesty, I didn't have the same experience with drinking during high school and college that many of my friends had. It wasn't something I had to hide. It didn't hold any kind of forbidden allure to me. It was just this normal thing that people sometimes did. When it came to sex, however, my parents took a very different approach. I was probably around 12, and I discovered a book from the 1970s with questions and answers about sex on my bookshelf. I'd never noticed it before, and I was pretty fastidious about keeping my bookshelves arranged, so I assumed my parents must have put it there for me to find. Despite being an FAQ about sex, I still had so many questions after I'd finished reading it. The problem was that the secretive and stealthy way my parents had put the book into my hands had given me the impression that they weren't comfortable talking to me about it. This was not something we would discuss during dinner. This was not a topic they wanted to bring up, ever. And so, as I got older, especially as I began questioning my sexuality, I never felt like I could talk to my parents about it. I didn't know how they felt about sex. I didn't know if it was going to be fun or scary or painful. We didn't talk about consent. The closest we ever came to talking about sex after the book incident was when my dad would jokingly tell us boys to wear a condom. I grew up feeling like sex was taboo, like it was something shameful and dirty and not to be discussed in the open. The same way I felt about mental health. I wear glasses, obviously. Less obviously, I suffer from migraines and chronic headaches. I used to get frequent throat infections. I had problems with my feet, and problems with my knees, and lots of problems with my sinuses. When my parents realized I was having trouble reading, they took me to an optometrist. I saw multiple doctors in different disciplines to try to find a solution for my headaches. I had my tonsils removed to alleviate my throat infections, and I saw a podiatrist to help with my feet and knees. When there was a problem, I told my parents about it, and they took me to the doctor to try to fix it. I also had ADD, though I didn't know it at the time. When I was in middle and high school, I couldn't not zone out in class. The sound of a teacher's voice made me go cross-eyed, and I would lose time. I was constantly frustrated by my inability to pay attention and get my work done. I tried everything I could to stay organized and on task. I used every method I could find to try to keep my brain from wandering off. Some of my solutions worked a little, but the problem persisted. My teachers told me I was smart, but that I lacked discipline. They told me I was lazy. And after a while, I believed them. My issues persisted into college and beyond. When I was 30, I was working at a job in computers. I'd recently gotten a promotion, and my responsibilities had tripled. I liked working with computers because the puzzle-solving nature of the work kept my brain engaged. My new duties, however, were more supervisory, and I would 30 minutes had passed. I was concerned that I had some kind of brain tumor or something, so I went to my doctor and I explained what was going on. She listened carefully and then suggested that I see a psychiatrist. At first, I thought she was saying that my issues weren't real, and when I pressed her about it, she asked if I'd ever been tested for ADD. To my knowledge, I hadn't, and I was desperate to find a solution to my problem, so I said I'd give it a try. I found a doctor who specialized in adult ADD. She tested me and talked to me about my childhood, and eventually determined that, yes, I definitely fit the criteria for the inattentive type of ADD. Over the next few months, we tried numerous different medications until we found one that worked for me. The first time I took that pill was like the first time I put on glasses. The whole world just came into focus. I remember sitting with my doctor after I had been on the medication for a month, and she asked me how I was doing with it. I looked at her and I said, "So this is what it feels like to be normal, isn't it?" Prior to my diagnosis, everything I'd learned about ADD, I'd learned from sensational news stories about schools overdiagnosing elementary kids and college students abusing ADD medications like Ritalin and Adderall. Obviously, almost everything I'd learned was wrong, but I still knew that most people viewed ADD the way I had, so I kept my diagnosis to myself for a while. When I finally told my mom that I'd been diagnosed with ADD, she said, "Oh, yeah, we had you tested in 5th grade and they wanted to put you on medication." I was floored. My mom had known all this time? "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why didn't you let them help me?" "Because," my mom said, "I didn't want you to use it as a crutch." Along with medication, my ADD doctor usually recommended cognitive behavioral therapy. She decided in my case, however, that it wasn't necessary because I developed a number of effective coping strategies on my own. As it turned out, I wasn't lazy. I was incredibly motivated. So motivated that I'd done everything I was mentally and physically able to do to overcome the disorder that I didn't even know I had. All I needed was the medication that would provide the chemicals that my brain was lacking. Yet that was what my parents had thought would be a crutch. Wearing glasses didn't give me the instant ability to read. I had to stay after school and get special help from a generous teacher. Getting orthotics for my shoes to support my messed up feet didn't make me a runner. I had to wake up early and put on those shoes and pound the sidewalks in the punishing Florida heat to get there. And even taking medication, I still have to sit my butt in a chair and write the words that eventually become books. The pill I take in the morning doesn't write my books for me. It doesn't put me in my chair. It just, like my glasses, brings the world into focus for me. But my parents didn't see that. They believed that taking medication for ADD would have been cheating. It'd be easy to be angry at my parents, and believe me, I gave it a really good shot all throughout my 20s. But it's not just them. I grew up in a culture in the South where talking about feelings and mental health was just not something we did. Family members with mental illness were kept a secret or whispered about when no one was around. My moods were the subject of jokes, and crying earned only derision and ridicule from my brothers. Any show of emotion other than anger was met with a lecture to suck it up or walk it off or be a man. And this unwillingness to discuss feelings and mental health, it's not just a Southern thing. I've talked to teens and adults from many different backgrounds and many different cultures, and almost every single one of them have some issues discussing and acting upon mental health. In movies, most people dealing with mental health problems are rarely portrayed well. The portrayals are inaccurate and often really offensive, and their stories nearly always end in tragedy or with them realizing that the power to be better was within them all along. There are very few positive depictions of people dealing with mental health issues in books or in movies or on TV. And forget about the way mental health is treated in the wider world. Schools, though they do try, simply aren't equipped to deal with the mental health of every single one of their students. And honestly, most workplaces just don't care. When I worked in the IT field, my coworkers and I used to joke about taking mental health days. The joke was that to get them, we had to lie about why we were really taking the day off. We invented illnesses or appointments or even dead relatives. Over the course of my many years in the IT field, I must have gone to 10 grandmothers' funerals. And how messed up is that? That it's easier and safer to say someone died than it is to say, I just need a break today. We associate mental illness with shame. We think that if we're suffering from mental illness, then we've somehow failed. No one has never, not even once, looked at my glasses, turned up their nose and said, if you really wanted to see better, you'd just try harder. Yet they've said that to me about my ADD. I've seen the looks in their eyes that tells me they think I'm cheating by taking medication. They think the same things about me that I used to think about myself. That I'm not trying hard enough, that I'm lazy, that there's nothing really wrong with me and it's all just in my head. I've had people very earnestly look at me when I've been struggling through a bad mental health day and say, but have you tried being happy? Is it any wonder then that after I got out of the psychiatric hospital when I was 19, I couldn't say the word for what had caused me to wind up there in the first place? Is it any wonder that I called my condition everything other than what it actually was? I had felt sad and I had felt hopeless, but I wasn't suffering from sadness or hopelessness. I was struggling with my sexuality, but I wasn't suffering from gayness. I was confused, but I wasn't suffering from confusion. And the day I swallowed an entire bottle of Tylenol really had been a very bad day, but it wasn't the first or the last bad day I would ever have. What I had was depression. I have depression. I couldn't say the word then, but I can say it now. And I do, often, and as loudly as I can. Not because I enjoy talking about it. The truth is that I'm an intensely private person, and letting people into my life makes me uncomfortable. But the discomfort is necessary. Discomfort is something that we all have to get used to. If my parents had talked to me about mental health the way they had talked to me about alcohol, instead of the way they talked to me about sex, then maybe I would have been able to say depression sooner. Maybe I would have felt comfortable talking about it. Maybe I would have been able to tell them that I was suffering, and they could have gotten me the help I needed, the same way they did when I needed glasses or when I had tonsillitis. If the stigma around mental illness didn't exist, maybe they would have let me be treated for my ADD when I was younger. Maybe I wouldn't have grown up feeling like mental illness was something shameful. Maybe I wouldn't have thought I had to fight it alone. And maybe I wouldn't have come dangerously close to losing that fight. I have depression. I say it a lot now. I use the word even when it makes others wish I wouldn't. I talk about depression the way I talk about having a cold. Oh, sure, I've been all right, working on a new book. Can't wait for the election in November. I was really depressed for a couple days, but I'm pretty good now. Of course, getting to that point wasn't easy. It was a therapist who actually helped me understand how to think about depression, kind of by accident, though. As it turns out, medication doesn't really work well for me when it comes to depression. I've found stuff that works, but it's not really all that great, and the side effects suck for me. As a result, I was seeing a therapist to try to find ways to handle my depressive episodes without medication. His best advice to me was to think about them like a riptide. So I grew up in Florida, on the beach, where rip currents were common. A rip current is a dangerous type of current that catches you and pulls you away from the shore. Most people who are unfamiliar with rip currents, they try to fight it, and they swim against them, which is the wrong thing to do, and a lot of people drown every year trying to do that. Instead, what you're supposed to do is relax. Let the rip current pull you out. Just go with it. And when it's pulled you far enough out, you can swim parallel to the shore until you're free of the current. Doing that is actually a method that works really well for me when it comes to depression. When a depressive episode comes on, I treat it like I do the flu. I treat the symptoms. I'm kind to myself. I lay on the couch and watch bad movies. I wait until it loosens its grip, and then I swim back to shore. But the epiphany for me wasn't the method of dealing with depression. It was how casually my therapist talked about it. Depression to me, up to that point, had been this huge, massive, overwhelming problem. But my doctor talked about it like it wasn't, and I'd never heard anyone do that before. Suddenly, depression was like my poor eyesight, like my bad arches, and like my crappy migraines. A problem, but not an insurmountable one. Like diabetes, depression can be potentially life-threatening if it's not managed properly, but it can be managed. That therapist helped me understand that being depressed and having a depressive episode, it's not a weakness. It's not shameful. It just is. In a way that I didn't quite understand at the time, it was like my therapist had given me permission to not be okay. I have depression. Some days I'm good. Some days I'm not. I'm no more ashamed of the days I'm not okay than I am of the days when I have a headache and can't function. If I'm out with friends or at a party and a headache comes on, I have no problem saying that I need to bail because of it, and no one has ever given me grief about it. It took me a long time, but I've learned to do the same thing with depression. And not everybody gets it, but I don't really give them much of a choice. I say it out loud. I talk about it a lot so that hopefully others will stop feeling uncomfortable, so that others will talk about it and understand that mental illness isn't a dark family secret, that being depressed isn't a weakness, that medication to treat mental illness isn't a cheat code to a better life. The opening line of the profoundly wonderful book, It's Kind of a Funny Story by Ned Vizzini goes like this: "It's so hard to talk when you want to kill yourself." The first time I read that, I finished the first line, set the book down, walked away from it, and didn't pick it up again for a couple of weeks. I have depression. I can say the word now, and that's a good thing, but it's not nearly enough. Saying the word, that's just the start of the conversation. After I got out of the hospital, I didn't talk to my mom about what had happened. It was like we had agreed to pretend that it was an aberration that would never happen again. Over the years, as I continued to struggle with depression, I'd try to bring it up occasionally, but every time I did, I would see this look of hurt in her eyes. I'd see how much pain and discomfort it caused her, so I kept it to myself. After I'd found the word depression and began using it, It was still well over a decade before I could even tiptoe around the subject with her. I have depression, but what does that mean? Sometimes it means that I cry for no reason. Sometimes it means that I wake up feeling hopeless. Sometimes it means that I feel like I'm coming down with a cold that never quite materializes. Sometimes it means that I lack the energy to do anything but sit on the couch and play video games. Sometimes it means that I want to punch a wall until my knuckles are bloody. Sometimes it means I hear a voice in the back of my head telling me that I'd be better off dead. Sometimes it means I pay more attention to that voice than I normally would. But I couldn't tell my mom those things because I'd see that look of pain in her eyes and I'd feel guilty for it. I couldn't tell my friends because I could see how uncomfortable it made them, and all they'd want to do was try to fix me. I definitely couldn't tell my coworkers, not if I wanted to keep my job. Sometimes I wouldn't even tell my doctor. I'd show up for my monthly appointment and fill out the form she gave me that asked me to rate my moods. And when I got to the question that asked if I'd thought about hurting myself or ending my life in the previous month, I would circle no, even if it was a lie. After my memoir Brave Face came out, I received a number of emails and letters from readers, like I said, always adults, wanting to know how I got better. As if reading about my experiences was fine, but what happened afterward? And in a way, I get where they're coming from. I understand the curiosity. I understand the desire to know what better looks like. But when I talk about depression, when I talk about my depression, I can't always talk about the part where I'm swimming back to shore. If we're going to be honest about it, if we're going to let people know that it's okay to not be okay, then we have to be able to talk about the parts of our depression where we're drowning. It's so hard to talk when you want to kill yourself. But it shouldn't be. Or rather, we shouldn't make it harder than it already is. We should do everything in our power to make it easy to talk about as possible. We have to make it easier. We have to make it normal. And that starts with us. Talking about depression and mental illness is like putting on an oxygen mask on a plane. You have to take care of yourself before you can help someone else. If you can't say the words, if you can't talk about it, then you can't expect others to feel safe and comfortable talking about it with you. I didn't just get letters from adults who'd read Brave Face. I got letters from young adults too. Sometimes I got letters from kids who were younger than teens, and I was like, I can't believe your parents let you read this. But where the adults wanted me to tell them how I got better, the teens almost universally were just happy to be seen. So now look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified to tell anyone how to manage their depression. I can't give anyone advice on which medications to take or what therapies might work for them. And that's not why I'm here or what I do. I actually had someone tell me that writing my memoir must have been so therapeutic for me, to which I responded with laughter, because no, it wasn't therapeutic. It actually really sucked. Reliving some of the most painful moments of my life was not fun at all, but I'd gone through it unable to say the words, unaware that the words even existed. And I hoped that by sharing my story, I might give others the words. I hoped it would make it easier for someone else to say that they have depression. I hoped it might help a parent understand that their child isn't broken and their child doesn't need to be fixed, and that seeking treatment for mental illness isn't shameful. I hoped they might feel seen. According to a 2019 CDC questionnaire of students in grades 9 through 12, 16% of high school students had made a plan for how they would attempt to end their lives. That rate was 12% for students who identified as heterosexual and 40% for students who identified as gay, lesbian, or bisexual. A study by the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018 found that more than 50% of transgender boys had attempted suicide, 30% of transgender girls, and 40% of non-binary teens. Young people are so vulnerable, and our young people from marginalized communities are even more so. queer youth are at a 4 times higher risk of suicide than their non-queer peers. Queer youth who come from unsupportive homes are at 8 times the risk. When I began writing Brave Face, I went looking for a way to explain the reasoning behind my eventual decision to attempt to end my life. I found it while listening to a podcast about a principal who attempted to use hypnotism to help his students. A therapist discussing why she believed one of the students who'd been hypnotized had ended her life said that the young woman had lost her ability to envision a future for herself. That explanation really clicked with me. I didn't attempt to end my life because I was gay. I did so because of depression. But at the time, when I was struggling with my sexuality, there was so little positive queer representation in the world and so much negative queer representation out there that I found myself unable to imagine a future as a gay person where I could be happy. Being queer doesn't cause depression any more than depression causes queerness, but study after study after study have shown that queer teens are more likely to engage in suicidal behavior, which makes it even more imperative that we support marginalized youth, that we provide them with support systems and examples of positive representation, that we speak our truths to them so that they will feel comfortable and confident speaking their truths to us, so that it's not hard for them to talk. In my book, We Are the Ants, a story about a boy grieving the loss of his boyfriend, and also with frequent alien abductions, the narrator, Henry, mentions that his mom took him to a psychiatrist when he first told them about being abducted by aliens, and that the psychiatrist thought he might have avoidant personality disorder. In the book, Henry didn't have avoidant personality disorder, and it was never mentioned again. I received a letter from a young person who said that they had been diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder, and they had never seen the words written in any book that they'd read before. They told me that just seeing those words written in that book, acknowledged as real, made them feel real. They made them feel valid and made them feel seen. When I visit schools, teachers are often surprised by the candor with which teens speak to me. It's not because I'm a particularly warm person. I'm honestly kind of socially awkward and I have difficulty connecting to people. But especially when it comes to mental health and queerness, people feel really comfortable talking to me because I'm honest when I talk to them. I say the words. I have depression. I'm honest about my struggles with it. Adults want me to tell them how it gets better. But teens understand when I tell them that there's no single path to better, that better is a journey rather than a destination, and that better is subjective, and that it's going to mean something different to everyone. Sometimes it's going to mean something different depending on the day of the week. There are days when, to me, better means waking up with a smile and singing my way through the morning. And then there are days when better for me just means waking up. Positive thinking can't cure cancer, and smiling more can't cure depression. Nothing can cure depression. But depression is like mold. It grows best in the dark. When we talk about it, we shine a light into those dark places. When we talk about it, we become a light for others so that they can see that they're not alone. The more of us who talk about it, the brighter it gets, and the fewer dark places there are for depression to grow. So we have to talk about mental health. We have to talk about it honestly, talk about it often, and talk about it loudly, and talk about it without judgment or shame. We have to normalize discussions of mental illness. We have to normalize the treatment of mental illness. We do those things by talking. We do that by using the words. We do that by encouraging others to talk. And we do it by listening as well. When I was starting out as a writer, Ned Vizzini's books were some of the first contemporary young adult books that I read. Ned seemed to be on the same trajectory that I wanted to be on, and we seemed to come from similar backgrounds. His book, It's Kind of a Funny Story, was based loosely on his own experiences checking himself into a psychiatric hospital. I never got to meet Ned, but he inspired me. He had attained the success that I was trying to achieve. In 2013, Ned Vizzini ended his life, and that really shook me. I'm not the kind of person who normally gets upset when famous people pass, but I was really upset when I found out about Ned. It made me feel vulnerable in a way that I hadn't felt for a really long time. It made me afraid. No one should ever die from depression, but silence makes us vulnerable. So let's not be silent. Let's speak our truths. Let's talk about it and make it easier for others to do the same. Let's be a light for one another in the darkest times. Let's remind each other that it's okay to not be okay. Let's say the words. My name is Shaun David Hutchinson, and I have depression. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaun. Wow.
Oh no, don't cry.
No, it was amazing. I actually, I felt like you were telling my story in some of those instances. So thank you so much. So at this point in our conversation, we would love to open this up to conversation, to questions, to
Yes.
sharing from your experience if you have an experience and would like to share. So I will just start off just to break the ice a bit. But I really, really loved what you said about depression being like mold, that it grows in the dark, right? And I'm so appreciative for conversations like this, because what they do is they shine the light. And I am so insanely appreciative of everyone who's joined this conversation, because we are the ones who are willing to shine the light, right? Just by showing up here today, you are willing to shine that flashlight so that someone doesn't have to get moldy. So I will mute myself, and if anyone has anything to say or speak to, or if you have a question for Shaun about what he just shared or about his books, please feel free to unmute yourself or place whatever you have to share in the chat. So this is that weird, awkward silence.
Well, I'll break it, not to waste any time. And I actually kind of have a question maybe for one of the librarians on the call, just because I'm curious. So I stumbled across, like I said, a Brave Face, and that was the book that was on a bookend that Summit County, it was at Summit County Library. So one of you chose to put that on the bookend. And I kind of laugh a little bit, Shaun, when you said you got emails from younger than, teenagers. And, I'm curious from the librarian's perspective, how did possibly one of you kind of stumble across this book and choose to put it on the bookend where, the age may not, I'm almost 40 and I picked up the book, not necessarily your demographic. So I'm just super curious from the librarians if they can shine some light there.
Well, I'm thinking it was probably on a display. Is that where it was? It's like I said in my intro, is that we are focused on being inclusive, diverse for everybody, and accessible. And I think those books just haven't been highlighted in the past. And we're just, trying to push more for that to be more visible, and that means showing the cover. I think there's been some studies that show that books are facing out, they see the title, and also creating that safe space within the library itself, having those titles and just everything for everybody, and they can pick them up. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Well, to add on to that too, especially with topics that are more sensitive, and if it's a young adult, they're not necessarily going to be like, hey, you guys, so I feel like poop. What do you got for me? You know, like that's not going to happen 9 times out of 10, right? So having books just like this out and available for someone to see, and that's like one thing that's like killing me slowly through COVID. It's like we're open at Park City, but we're not browsing. Like we have study rooms available and computers, and that's it. So like that takes away from the, well, I really want a book about this, but I can't just like grab it and I don't want to ask for it, you know, like, and I'm going through a trying time myself right now. And it's like, I don't want to put a book on hold and like have people see what it's about, you know, and like, that's even from like my personal perspective right now too. So it's just like, it's a hard time right now, but yes to displays, and yes.
Well,
It's
I just wanted to thank y'all, because like when we were like, when I was waiting to see what the cover was going to look like, and when my editor first emailed, they were like, so we want to put a picture of you on the cover, and I was like, no, like we're not doing that. Like no. And so they were kind of a little annoyed with me about that, but they went out and they found, you know, this illustrator, John Contino, who had also done the cover for Girl Man's Up. And he took a scene. He took a scene from when I wore that queer shirt, and he drew it. And when they first showed it to me, like I was in tears, because not only was it on the cover, it was the word queer, like just there, like boldly, but there was also, you could still see the depression in the set of the shoulders and in the way that the head is hanging. And yet the orange background was just so bright and hopeful. And I mean, it was just this amazing thing. But I was talking to my editor when she showed it to me, and I was just like, but is anyone ever going to put this out? Like, is Barnes and Noble going to face this out? Are librarians going to be able to put this out? Are teachers going to have this in their classroom? And she just said, tough. Like, I think that there will be people out there who will, and it will reach, because this was every day. Like when we were doing this, I was like, okay, I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. Let's not do this book. And she was just like, no. Like if one teen reads this and it helps them, then that makes it worthwhile. And so that was our goal with this, is that the libraries and the librarians who do it, like they'll do it, you know, and I just want to, I appreciate y'all for doing that, because I know how communities can be, and I know how parents can be, and sometimes not even parents. It's just, you know, nosy adults who think that they know what everyone else should read. So I appreciate what y'all did so much. Sorry, I just had to gush a little.
If I can add on to that as well, I just appreciate what you said about normalizing the conversation, and part of our displays and putting those books out is part of that normalizing. I think there's been a push lately where everyone has their big Pride Month display, and then you don't hear about it for the rest of the year. So I think with us as librarians, that's one of our major goals, is to normalize. And if we have a display for Valentine's Day, it includes queer books with queer romance. And so thank you, because I appreciate authors like you that represent those marginalized voice, you know, the kids here that don't always get heard and don't see themselves in the books. So it's getting better.
Yes.
But
And to like add on to that, it's so wonderful when, you know, putting books together for people and they're like, oh, just pick 10 books, and to be like, I'm just going to put a couple of these bad boys in there and see ya, you know, that's what it's all about. You know, it's just like, you don't know what you're missing until you read it.
Oh yeah, those are the best emails I get, are the ones from readers who are just like, I didn't know I was getting a gay book, but I got it and I liked it and I want more now. And I'm like, yes, you know, because that's the thing is, you know, like I mean, I grew up watching like, you know, romance movies and stuff like that, and seeing, you know, heterosexual romances, and like there's like, it doesn't bother me. Like, sure, I'm not into it, but like, there's still like The English Patient is like my all-time absolute favorite movie. And one day I'd love to see a gay remake, but until then, you know, but I think that those like kids who are able to pick those books up, like if we're, you know, if they don't think like, I don't know, I think if we just put it in there, like you said, we normalize it, then it's going to be a thing. And actually I see that all the time. I see it a lot more now than I ever did before. And I think kids are way smarter than we are.
If I can continue talking.
Oh, sorry.
No, I had a question. I just like I'm talking a lot, but I did have a question because your story about talking to your parents or not talking, and just the shame and the guilt involved in that. Was there anybody in your life that approached it in a positive way that actually might have helped you, even just a little bit, like in asking? I think it takes a lot of bravery to not only admit it, but also to ask somebody about that. And so I was just wondering if there's anyone in your life that
Yeah.
impacted you.
Actually, my best friend, Rachel, we've been friends since high school. And I didn't know that that's what we were talking about at the time. Like, I didn't know, like, we were talking about mental health. And one of the things that strained our relationship is that, you know, I had talked to her about being depressed and being suicidal. And she had made me promise her that if I was ever serious about considering it, that I would give her a 24-hour notice. And it really kind of hurt our relationship because she went away for spring break. And I never gave her that notice, and I never gave her the opportunity. And I think if I had, she would have helped. I know she would have. And so that was actually something that I struggled with, for really like the guilt from that. But yeah, being able to talk to her. But I thought, you know, it took me a long time to realize what that relationship and what she had given me in that was, because we talked about everything. Like, you know, we had that kind of relationship. So I wasn't able to, like, I didn't see how easy it was to talk with mental health about her, was because she was so open about her own struggles. I just thought it was because it's her, and like, we talk about everything. So, but yeah, she was, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was a positive, you know, person in my life. And I think I touch on it a lot in Brave Face, is just, there were a lot more positive influences in my life than I actually understood. And that was, looking back, something that was difficult to see, was that a lot of the things that I complained about, or not complained, but that I didn't think I had in my life, were really there. And I just didn't notice them. And I didn't talk about them. And that does go back to, you know, not talking about things. And it's funny because, you know, I talk about my mom and my parents. And the funny thing is like, I love my parents, and my mom and I have had a lot of really long talks about, you know, like, she didn't realize she was doing anything wrong because that was the way she was brought up. And, you know, and now she, you know, like, we've spent so much time talking, like, she thinks she has ADD, and we know that she has depression and anxiety, and like, but, you know, and so me being open with it has caused her to look at herself in a different way, and to look at her own problems and try to work with them. And so I think that that's a really, you know, kind of wonderful thing. But, you know, it's just this culture. I think it's a whole culture of silence that makes it really difficult to talk to. But yeah, I mean, it was really hard because, especially in the 90s, it was like feelings, like, you know, and even like, I saw a therapist when I was like 15 because we were having family problems, but it was more focused on what I was doing wrong. It was that sort of like tough love family Christian therapy, because my biological father was really into that. So, you know, it was, I'll tell you, I mean, that's why like honesty and all of that, like, is so important, because early experiences can really sort of, you know, taint, you know, how you look at things. Yeah. So yes, they were there, but I was just terrible at seeing them.
I just want to thank you for the thanks that you give to the librarians that you had, your middle school librarian who gave you Dune secretly because you had read all the books that you read basically every book, I think you said, and the importance of librarians who can do that, who can, at their own risk in some cases, give people books, give kids books that will make such a tremendous difference in their lives.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I am pretty convinced, and I don't know, I'm not sure if she is still with us because she was fairly older when I was in middle school, but I'm fairly certain that she was giving me books from her private collection. I don't think that they were actually library books. I think she was bringing them from home to give to me because I had just outgrown everything in our school library. And it was a Catholic school. So it was fairly tame already. So yeah, she made a huge impact. We're making poor Betty cry up there.
Oh, Deanna knows I cry. I cry. It's just what I do, Shaun. No worries.
Yeah, it's hard to watch this without, just feeling, just so much. And I think that's amazing. And it's, it speaks, Shaun, to your vulnerability to kind of open up this space. And then, just again, some of the right people. I mean, we are recording this and we are live on Facebook and we don't know who's out there observing us, but with this group that we have on the Zoom call, I mean, it feels like a safe space, right? And that's what I think Connect Summit County and the libraries we partnered with, we want to be able to create that safe space right here in Summit County. And it's really interesting, all the things you equated with trainer. Of course I'm going to wear glasses. Of course I'm going to wear correct running shoes. Of course I'm going to do all of these things. That's really, actually, ironically, today, this bluebird on my shoulder here, we are launching a community-wide anti-stigma campaign to really address and say, mental health, it's just part of our nature, just like this bluebird, and it's part of our nature, and we should talk about it. And so let's tell our stories, because I think that's something that we realize is there is major power. And what, sorry, I'm on a soapbox for one hot second, but something that I think is so powerful is, and I don't want to sound like that person that said, oh, writing a book was therapeutic, right? Please don't extrapolate that. But when we tell about ourselves and we're authentic and we are vulnerable, and that the mold growing in the dark, right? We've shined a light on that. And we're able to, I mean, it's just so freeing for ourselves, right? As well as the people that maybe are hearing us or observing us in these stories that we tell. And so that's what, with our anti-stigma campaign that we're launching right now, is we're really trying to encourage everyone, anyone, to bring that up, talk about it. Say, I am Deanna and I am depressed, right? Like, that is a powerful thing. And it's hard, I mean, all of us on this call have probably taken many years to get to that point where we can say those things, but I think it's incredibly powerful. So just thank you for creating, helping us create this space today.
Well, and thank you for everything that y'all do. And I think like the lesson that I kind of learned about this was, I wrote about coming out to my boss at the Sunglass Hut and how, he was from South America and he was liberal with the F word. And when I finally told him, he was like, oh, like, I didn't know gay people could be like you, because he had an image in his mind of how gay people acted. And I think the same thing happens with mental health is, I can be like, at these, book conventions and talking and laughing and telling people, and they're like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm really going through a rough period right now. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, like, you can be smiling and laughing and still be depressed. Like, people don't get that. Like, they think like, oh, you're suffering from depression, you must be like on the couch in your pajamas, like, and that's the only way that depression looks. And so it's not just about getting rid of the stigma. It's also about showing people the different faces of depression, that it doesn't look the way it always looks in the movies, that, like, some of the most like put together people that I know are like anxiety like sufferers, right? But you would never know. And it's, and so saying it helps other people understand. And, and that's actually, it's also something I learned from my mom growing up, because she fell down a flight of steps when I was 7. And so she suffered chronic back pain for her entire life. She was sued and forced to go on disability because she wanted to keep working, but she couldn't. And but people who didn't know her were constantly like, "You're faking it, aren't you?" Like, she was constantly being told that, because she was just, she was able to do too much. And, oh, if you were really in pain, you would just be in bed all the time. And she was in constant pain. And I would watch this. I would watch her come home and just collapse, and I would watch her, she raised us, all of us boys. And it took a toll on her, but she never showed it. And so, and I think that mental illness is the same way. And so, yeah, I think that the more we talk about it and the more faces of it we show, we help people who don't, because I think a lot of the whole, like, why don't you just try being happier? I don't think that comes from a bad place. I think it comes from a place of ignorance, like, they don't understand depression. And so, they don't get it. And so we talk about it, and that's how we educate them. And show them that it's not what you see on TV all the time. Oh, and like, my biggest hope, honestly, when we talk about Therapeutic with Brave Face, like, honest to God, my biggest hope for that book is that it goes out of print at some point, because it's not relevant anymore. Like, that's it. Like, all of my books have stayed in print over the last 10 years. And I hope that one is the first to go out of print, because nobody needs it. And that would make me so happy. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So we do have a question in the chat.
Oh, yay.
Brittany says, Shaun, what are your thoughts on saying fake it till you make it?
Are we talking about, like, in a job or just in general? I always kind of feel like I'm faking it for a while. Like, that it's kind of how I got through everything. Is whenever I would get asked, could I do something at a job, I would always go, yes, and then figure out how to do it later. That was just, it was just how I kind of worked. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, you don't, obviously, like, I would never try and fake being a doctor, because that's just not going to happen. But, I think in a small way, like, even now, 10 years later, I still kind of feel like I'm faking it as a writer, and that's imposter syndrome. And that's a tough thing to get over. And every author I know deals with that. Every single one. I don't think I have ever talked to an author who is like, yeah, I'm just awesome. Like, I don't know that they exist. And I think if they said it, they would be lying. But, I think fake it till you make it. What that really means, though, is that you're learning, and we're all kind of learning, and we're all learning, how to go. And so, like, I'll equate this more to, like, mental health, and back to that conversation, and not just like a career thing, is 10 years ago when I started doing all of this, and I became really aware of the transgender community. I didn't understand what being transgender meant. I didn't understand it, because I had always felt comfortable as a male. And so it was very difficult for me to put myself into that mindset. But I told myself, like, I don't have to understand it to accept it. And so to me, I was kind of faking it until I did understand it, until I had met more transgender individuals that I could talk to, and that I could get to know. And now I do. I have a much better understanding. I will never fully understand, because I don't think that that's something anyone can understand until it is their lived experience. But I have a much better understanding now. And so, yeah, to me, I think that's probably a good way to look at it when it comes to mental health stuff, is you don't have to understand what somebody's going through to accept that they're going through it. And then you can educate yourself later. I hope that answers the question. I don't know. I'm terrible at questions.
No, oh, go ahead, Katrina.
No, I was just going to say, like, for me, sometimes it's like, if I'm like, fake it till you make it, just put on the face, and then it like just distracts me enough to get me like the momentum to start the day, or, you know, whether it's that saying or whether it's just like, okay, I'm gonna put my big girl pants on and do this today and get dressed and shower. Like, you know, just a little catapult or lever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to depression, I totally get that. Like, there are days where I wake up and I just know. And it's so interesting because one of the things that I really understood about depression later on in life was once I had separated, like my teens and 20s were really tumultuous and difficult. Like I had a lot of issues. And once things started to settle for me in my early 30s, I was able to separate like things that happened to me and depression. And I began to sort of understand, like, when a depressive episode is coming on, I almost always feel like I'm getting the flu or a cold. And that's when I know, like, okay, like this is going to happen. And most of the time I'm able to just roll with it. But there are days where I can't. Like, I'm at a festival and I am expected to sit in front of people and smile and answer questions and sign books. And they have, you know, put in their time to be there, and I owe it to them, you know, to be there as well. And so, yeah, sometimes I do have to fake it a little bit. But I'm also kind of honest about it at the same time. Like, if somebody says like, you know, like, oh, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm off today. Like, I'm not having the greatest day, you know? But yeah, I mean, there are days where, you know, you just kind of have to roll with it. But then I'll tell you what, as soon as I'm alone, I'm just like, done. I just crash and I'm just like, I'm done. And you know, and then sometimes that doesn't even, I was at with an author at this big convention, and they had this event where they released authors into this like penned-in area that was full of librarians, and then librarians attacked, and there was alcohol involved, and so one of the I know this is like when you take a whole bunch of extroverts and then drop a whole bunch of introverts in the middle. It's really weird. And then add alcohol. But anyway, so an author turned to me and he said, I'm going to hide in the corner. Don't tell anyone where I am. And I was just like, you do you. Like, you do what you need to do. And, you know, and it was funny because he eventually, like, a librarian found him. And he ended up having a really good conversation with like that one person, you know, because sometimes one person is all you can deal with at that moment. And so, yeah, I don't know how I got off onto that, but fake it till you make it, but also know your limitations, you know, and I think that is a really important thing. Just speaking up and being able to say like, now I'm done. And I think that I find that people now are more understanding. I went to this school visit once and we started talking about it, and the kids all of a sudden, like, they were just like, they let it all out. Like no inhibitions, no walls, no anything. They were talking about it, and not just talking about, you know, like dealing with depression and anxiety and all of those things, but then also talking about, you know, the struggles that they have with their families. And, you know, like there was one young woman who, you know, was really struggling with depression, but her parents were very religious and didn't believe in medication. And, you know, and so it was a struggle for her. And yet she was there talking to other people and giving some of the other teens advice on how to deal with their parents. And I just think like the strength in that was so amazing to me. And I think that the strength came from their honesty with each other and being able to talk about it. And it was really cool.
I know some young people who when they first looked at your book, and I think it was dedicated or I wish I don't have it in front of me, brave face. I have it, but I don't know.
It's dedicated to everyone who's ever felt a little queer.
Okay. And somewhere in the book you said you're not alone, and I had a couple people say, you know, of course I'm alone. Of course I'm alone. How is this book going to help me feel like I'm not alone? But then those same kids at the end said, you know what, I don't feel like I'm alone anymore. Your book did that for them. It made them feel, even though they were skeptical at the beginning, that they really weren't alone. And I didn't pursue it. I just smiled and said, that's awesome. And here's some more books by him and you should read them all. And, but I just thought you should know that it really, I hope it never goes out of print, because it's going to help so many kids really feel like they're not alone, even though they never believed anything could make them feel that.
Thank you for that. And,
Thank you.
you know, what's really interesting about that was when I was doing early copies of it before it went out to print, I sent copies to other queer authors, you know, to read. And I got a lot of responses back. And it was, I did this exact same thing, or I saw that exact same movie, or like, I mean, it was just, this happened to me, or this was my life, or this was this. And it was like we were all out there imagining that we were alone and then there was nobody who would understand what we were going through, but we were all just out there. Like, and you know, if we had been able to connect, you know, we wouldn't have been alone. And you know, and I hope for that for, you know, teens, and the internet helps some. I'm wary of it. But you know, I think that you know, really just knowing, like it really surprised me, that kid who emailed me about having avoidant personality disorder. I mean, it wasn't like, it was literally like, it was not a plot point. It was just a, you know, it was just a line, and it made them feel like they were real. And I was just, and so just like having that out there, acknowledging something, it means so much. And so, you know, being able to tell stories, and over the last, you know, 10 years, I've gotten to see other authors tell their stories. And it's just been like, I remember when I was writing my first book with a, you know, gay protagonist, my first agent didn't want anything to do with it. I don't think he was homophobic. I just think he thought he couldn't sell it. And so I eventually let him go. And, you know, we did sell that book. And it was The 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley. And there were, I mean, I was convinced like it wasn't going to do anything, you know, like that this was going to end my writing career. And, you know, and if I'm going to end it, I'm going to go out on a book that, you know, like I'm really proud of. And, you know, and here we are 10 years later. And just today, Adam Sass's book, Surrender Your Sons, came out. And this is a book that could not have been written 10 years ago. It wouldn't, you know, it's a book about, it's like Lost, you know, it's gay Lost with conversion therapy. It's hilarious and heartbreaking. And I mean, and everything. And then you've got authors like, you know, Julian Winters. I'm so anxious for summer to be over. No, Julian Winters, who's writing just the sweetest books. Like they're so hopeful and so sweet and just everything I wanted. And then Cemetery Boys, a book by a transgender author, hit the New York Times bestseller list. Like, this is mind-blowing. Like, this would never have happened 10 years ago. And so, like, just getting to see this, like getting to be a part of this is so amazing to me, because I come from a very limited background. You know, I'm gay and I'm white and I'm male, cisgender, and that's it. And so it's great that, you know, I write books and that other queer kids can look at that. But now there's like such a wide, broad world, you know, of queerness for them to explore. And we're getting those books, and we're not just getting them, but they're popular. Like that's, you know, it was like when I found out in my 30s that at some point between high school and when I was 30, Dungeons and Dragons became cool again. And I was like, or it became cool, not just again, but it became cool. And I was like, wait, when did that happen? Because when I played, I got made fun of, and now it's suddenly cool. And so seeing, you know, things like Love, Simon, you know, getting its own movie and now its own TV show, I just think it's all amazing. And I'm so happy to be a part of that.
Oh my goodness. I think that we could probably talk for like 10 more hours because this is so amazing, right? And I really, really love how connected I feel right now. The universal nature of this conversation, although there is stigma around it, right? the universal reach of this conversation. Like it's so amazing, and it's actually something that I felt while you were speaking before the Q&A, Shaun, realizing that we are all unique and we're all amazing beings with our own flavor on this earth, and yet there are certain things that we experience as being ours or siloed or different from everyone that are actually completely universal feelings. And I appreciate so much for the trails that you've blazed, right? Like you were saying, the things that are happening right now weren't going to happen 10 years ago. So thank you for being willing to blaze those trails as someone who handles depression and anxiety and ADD and all of the myriad other emotions that you handle on a daily basis. Thank you for being willing to share yourself through your literature and through events like this. Because in this way, we can all really actually experience our universal connection. And like Connect Summit County, we like to think of ourselves as the tide that lifts all boats, right? And it is so obvious that you too are a tide that lifts all boats, that you share in others' success, and that you are committed to shining a light on this no matter how uncomfortable it is for you. So thank you so much. And I am going to guess that we will probably be collaborating more.
Yay.
If you are up for that.
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, our pleasure too. And thank you all so very much for being here, for entering this Zoom conversation, and for watching on the Facebook Live, or if you're catching the recording, thank you for sticking with us, because this conversation is relevant and impactful, and I appreciate all of the voices who got to share tonight.
Can I just say one quick more thing to Shaun? Shaun, the fact that you put things in like avoidant personality disorder, or that, and I can't remember if it was Dre or Dean, which one liked Hedwig and the Angry Inch and which one liked A Quiet Place, and mentioning Beautiful Thing in Brave Face, that stuff, I mean, kids pick up on that. And they ask me like, is this real? Like Quiet Place I know is on Netflix, but what is this Hedwig and the Angry Inch? And I'm like, oh boy. Well, honey, I don't know if I can, I don't know, but you know, it's so great that you put that stuff in there, those little references. These kids pick up on it. It's amazing to me that, and like they don't with other authors. So thank you.
Well, you know, I mean, and it's fun that you bring up, you know, Dre, because, you know, one of the things that we fight against our own biases as well. And one of the biases that I had, you know, growing up, like, especially when I came through, you know, in the early 2000s, was the idea of masculinity and gayness, and that, you know, being effeminate was the worst kind of gay you could be. And I went through a lot of internalized homophobia, where I was afraid to embrace the things about myself that were more feminine. And I call it, you know, the Will and Jack paradigm. You know, it's like most of the gays that I knew in the early 2000s wanted to be more like Will. They wanted to be straight passing, but many of us were like Jack and just couldn't admit that. And so getting to write, you know, Dre as a character was my way of finally embracing and acknowledging, you know, this part of our community that has been, you know, so important, and that is so important. And I loved being able to, you know, to write that character, especially since the character I've been so like terrified to write for so long, you know? And so, you know, I hope I honestly, a lot of the times when I write things, I do it so in the hopes that these kids who read it won't go through the same, you know, silly stuff that I went through, and they won't absorb the same biases and misconceptions that, that I absorbed when I was younger. So.
And I think you're succeeding. The way that Dre's dad loves him so much and is so proud of him, no matter what, and no matter what he wears and his friends. And it's so, the kids do need that. They need to see that. Thank you. And you're one of the only people out there showing them. So
there's a lot. I'll give you names. We're out there. Books
well, you
are
did
tough.
Tonight, right? Sass
Yes.
and Winters, and I'm jotting them down.
Aiden Thomas, and there's so many authors out there. They're really doing it. And actually, I'll put it out there. The Rainbow List that the ALA does every single year is a really wonderful resource. They have been just so great and inclusive. So yeah, that's always like the kind of the first place that I point people to.
But you know what? Your books they're at the cream of the crop. The kids relate to them. Even the 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley, and how interesting it was. But I mean, what an interesting story in the artwork and the comics, and kids are drawn to it just from that. And I mean, everything you've written, everything is just remarkable.
Well, thank
you.
you.
It really reaches these kids in a way that other books don't. So thank you.
Thank you.
Something the libraries both during May, you guys both put together reading lists for us about mental illness in general. One was a youth reading list and one was for adults. And I really appreciate that. And so I'd love to, either grab the rainbow list or maybe you guys together want to put together this list with all the recommendations and maybe a few of your own that we can share from Connect Summit County and kind of put it along with this recording. That would be amazing. So, we are way over time, and like Betty said, lost Betty to bedtime, so she had to put her children to sleep. So, but with that, we'll close for today. And just again, so grateful for this conversation. And like Betty had mentioned, how can we keep it going? And are there other collaborations or conversations around other books that we want to have, or just continue this conversation, I think can be really powerful. So again, just thank you so much, all of you. Shaun, thank you for your time and your willingness. You have been one of the easiest people to work with. When we talked to you initially, you were going to fly out here, right? And then we switched over to Zoom, but we still had the opportunity to really engage with you. And we just are so grateful. So thank you. Your energy and your time on that.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Any chance to, to be able to do this, I think, teens are worth it.
Absolutely. Very good. Cool. Well, with that, good evening, everybody. Take care. Sleep tight.
Thank you.